Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chayam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Tirayam Nasta Prayestu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashloke Bhakti Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Shri Chaitanya Prasadena Yadrupasya Vinirnayam Valapi Kurite Shastram Drisva Vraja Vilasan. Good morning, dear devotee.
You've got two online.
Jayo. Good morning. Excited to be reading again from the 10th canto and discussing the pastimes of Krishna killing the demons, taking care of the bad guys. Today happens to be one of my personal favorite leelas, the killing of Aristasura, a bull, a demon who manifests in the form of a bull. And as we've been learning to do with this whole series, it's good to consider the imagery of the particular demon and the particular anartha, or bad habits, ugly tendencies that they represent. And as has been in the case with other demons, Aristasura's very form indicates something about what's going on. The whirlwind demon, whose name is Trinavarta, we heard about how is the personification of this argumentative mood even in the devotee sangha. And so when somebody comes in and just wants to argue, then all they do is create this confusion. There's this whirlwind, and you don't know up from down, and you get sucked up into it and thrown far away from Krishna and devotional service. And that's Trinavarta as one example of how the imagery of the demon's very behavior indicates the particular fault that they're representing. And with Aristasura, it's also quite obvious because he's a bull, and the bull is considered the personification of Dharma. In Vedic culture, you have Gomata, you have mother cow, and you have father bull. And why is bull considered the father? Well, he plows the field, he gives the grain, the very food that we eat and the rest of humanity survives on is provided for by the bull. He pulls our carts and allows us to go here and there. And Gomata, of course, gives her milk. And then the urine of both can be used medicinally. The dung is used for fuel for burning the fire. What to speak of the more subtle benefits? Even scientists these days, I just saw an article 2 years ago in Australia, they've done some research. Why do people get happy when they garden? What's so great about gardening? There seems to be this natural joy that comes to people when that goes on. So of course the scientists want to reduce it to molecular interactions. They take all the fun out of it, right, and turn it into something mechanistic. But anyway,
the enzymes in the soil.
Right. Well, this is exactly what they discovered. According to them, the joy of gardening. We know it's something much more. But according to them, one of the potent effects of putting your hands in the dirt is that you interact with a particular bacteria which is in the dirt, which produces a kind of chemical which acts as an endorphin, acts as like a happy chemical in our system. And they trace the origin of said bacteria that is in the soil now back to the digestive system of the cows and bulls. So the stool of the cows and the bulls has been spread all over the earth. And because of that, that little bacteria is all over the earth. And so we get happy by hanging out, by digging in the soil because of that bacteria. Now we know it's, of course, a much more wholesome activity. You can't reduce it to just that, but it was cute to see that the scientists were seeing something of the value of even the stool of Gomata, and what to speak of their physical form. And when you get the opportunity, when you actually take care of the cows when you pet them for a little while, you feel it, you see it, that there's something transcendental going on here. There's something on a subtle level that no scientist will ever be able to explain to me that's bringing me satisfaction, that's kind of cleansing my subtle body. My mind feels settled. I feel at ease in a way that I normally don't. So now cow therapy is a big thing. I saw an article in the New York Times, $300 an hour. People are paying to do cow therapy.
300?
An hour. But the whole Vedic culture is cow therapy. the whole of a natural civilization based around man's relationship with the cow is such that you'd be interacting daily and appreciating daily and connecting daily with Gomata and Father Bull. So Aristasura, this demon who came to Vraj, he came as a bull, and what the particular anartha that Aristasura represents is cheating religion characterized by practices which are not authorized. You just make up your own thing, and you get a bunch of other people to do it with you. And why are you making up your own thing? For the usual purposes. You want name, you want fame, you want adoration, you want distinction, you want money, you want the power that comes with so many followers. So you make up your own process, you get other people to follow that process. And that's Aristasura's particular characterization. He came as a bull, he came looking pious, he came looking religious, but actually his real intent was against pure devotional service. It was against Krishna, it was against the Vrajvasis. So it was a very literal, kind of direct, obvious import to Aristasura's coming. And I also really like how Krishna takes care of Aristasura, because Aristasura charges at Krishna, and Krishna grabs him by the horns, chucks him a couple yards. And Aristasura, this is upsetting him now, and he's pissed because this like 7-year-old just tossed him 30 feet. Wasn't expecting that, right? He thought he'd have his way with this village. And then he charges at Krishna again, and Prabhupada describes, and it's also described in the Bhagavatam, that he's dripping with sweat now already after just one charge at Krishna. And this time when he charges Krishna, Krishna grabs hold of one of his horns, snaps it off, and smashes him in the head with it. Super dramatic. Yeah. It's really graphic. And from that is, his head concusses and his body starts involuntarily passing blood, stool and urine, and his eyes bulge out of his sockets, and he writhes for a few moments before dying. And I love that Aristasura was killed with his own horn, because this is what happens with cheating religion, is that it's undone by its own behavior. It's itself untenable. And this is the nature of many of the anarthas that was brought out by yourself nicely, Bhishma Prabhu, when you're talking about the forest fire, right? That the forest fire itself will eventually burn itself out. It can't be sustained. It can't maintain. It's an unwholesome functioning. And so because of that, it eventually dies, even if nobody comes to try to put it out. Similarly, cheating religion eventually kills itself. Vrindavani and I, we recently watched this documentary called Wild Country, which was about they call them the Rajneeshis, but ourselves, we know them as the Osho followers. And this goofball, Osho, there was no process. That was the process, right? That you just kind of do whatever you want, but you do it near me. And they had maybe a few practices. They would just lock themselves in rooms and go wild, and that was one of their sadhanas. Do whatever you want in this room. And because we're together, and because we all love Osho, and something spiritual will happen while we act like idiots for 4 hours in a room, screaming and getting naked and writhing on each other. And this is what passed for religion for these people. And they aggregated tens of thousands of followers. But eventually the whole thing fell apart in this really ugly scandal of murder and money laundering and felonies, and this whole ugly inbred thing. And that's exactly what happens with fake religion, is that eventually it kills itself. It's just like a kind of virus within a body. The virus is going to enjoy living in the body until the virus kills the body itself, and then the virus also dies inside the body because the body can't be sustained like a tapeworm or something. The tapeworm is eating away the nutrient and the sustenance for the individual, and in doing that, the host, which it's actually depending on, dies, and then the tapeworm dies. So cheating religion has that effect also, is that it kills itself off, but first not without creating a lot of collateral damage. We, especially from the West, are prone to this tendency towards being attracted to cheating religion because we've had so many bad experiences with so-called authorized religions, especially Christianity, the Judeo-Christian paradigm. It's so shallow the way it's presented, and it's so obviously cheating that those of us in the West feel it's almost our duty to come up with some other religion, to come up with some other way to be that hasn't been presented yet, because clearly, if the right thing was being done somewhere, then more people would be doing it. It's kind of a natural, logical conclusion. Like, I remember having this discussion once with a young man at U of M. It's like, well, if this Krishna consciousness process is so great, then why aren't more people doing it? And it's a fair question, right? If this is really what relieves anxiety and stress and reestablishes you with your eternal natural self, and you think like a few more people would care. But I pointed out to him that in Ann Arbor, at lunchtime, although Ann Arbor, by the standard of modern culture, is considered to be the most educated city in America. Right?
Really?
Yeah, the most degrees per capita in all of America. So like your average person in Ann Arbor will be at least a master's degree is kind of the average. Although it's the most educated city in America, still at 12:30, 1 o'clock on a Wednesday, you'll see a line out to the street for McDonald's drive-thru. McDonald's, a place that everybody knows is serving poison, right? Objectively, even a guy that eats meat and drinks beer and whatever else knows that McDonald's is terrible for you. We've all seen those pictures of, McDonald's fries ordered 7 years ago, and 7 years later, they still look the same.
Do they really?
Oh yeah, the fries,
Oh my God.
the cheeseburgers.
Oh man.
We've all seen those pictures. We've all seen the, what was that documentary, Super Size Me? Right, where the guy was like in pretty good physical health, and then 30 days later, his body's like shutting down, about to
By
die.
like day 10, he felt like he was gonna go into cardiac arrest.
Right, it didn't take the 30 days. It was by like day 10, and already the doctor was like, I think you need to stop this. Otherwise, like, there may be irreparable damage to your system just because he chose to eat McDonald's for 10, up to that point, 10 days straight, and then 30 days overall. So we're all aware of this. And yet, still so many people in the and it's not like all the cars that are pulled into the McDonald's driveway are like hoopties, like poor folk from the hood who can only afford 99-cent hamburgers or whatever. You got Cadillacs and BMW, the well-educated folks of Ann Arbor are still going to get their McDonald's. So just because we know what to do doesn't mean we'll do it. Just because we know what is good for us, there's no evidence that humanity is actually capable of doing that. So the argument falls apart right in front of us. There's so many people doing things they know they ought not to do, things they know are destructive for them, and still they're compelled to for a myriad of reasons. So with our tendency towards rejecting religious process, we have to be careful, especially in relationship to Krishna consciousness, that just because others aren't doing it doesn't mean it needs to be done some other way. Doesn't mean somebody else hasn't already figured it out already. And this is one of the primary points of humility, practical humility we need to accept when we come to a bona fide spiritual path, is that I don't have to figure it out. It's been figured out for me. I have to simply apply myself to that which has already been proved to work. And again, it runs against the grain of looking around and saying, well, it doesn't look like many people have figured much out in this world, so I have to figure out something for myself. But if we come to the devotee Sangha, and we look especially at the lives of someone like Srila Prabhupada, but even his sincere followers and the followers of his followers, we can see, oh, something's working. Something's happening here. And if I apply myself to that same something, then I can expect to get the result. That's the kind of confidence Rupa Goswami says we should have. When we come to the devotee sangha, sometimes it's misconstrued that we should be kind of like sycophantic, servile, self-deprecating, and that counts for humility. That's not real humility. Real humility is to accept that with whatever capacity I have, which I might have a lot, I might be a very capable person, I'm going to dedicate that to the vision and idea of a more worthy person, rather than myself try to establish some grand scheme or theme independent. I'm going to simply use my attributes and serve somebody else's cause, the supreme cause, ideally. And that's the opportunity we have in this Bhakti Sangha. So coming in and taking stock of what we can do and how we can do it, like Bhishma is very eager to offer all of his skills as a videographer anytime he can to the devotees. He doesn't say, well, I suck at that. I don't know what I'm doing, guys. No, he says,
I mean, it's true.
I think no, well, you might think that, but at least you let us, the others, you avail us of your services, and it's wonderful. Your photography, your video, your web design, etc., much better than what most other people are saying they can do that are capable of doing. And you're offering that as an offering, as a service to the larger effort of the mission of Srila Prabhupada and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So that's real humility, and it's also real confidence that I have something I'm capable of doing, and I see a place where it's worthy of being offered. One of my friends, his name's Sadhuj. You guys know him? He's German. Kandama. So Sadhuj, he told me about the first time he went to the temple. And this is just to illustrate the tendency of us from the West to speculate and to come up with our own ideas about what's going on and what we should be doing in Krishna consciousness. So he heard about these Hare Krishna people, and he went to the temple, and he was already kind of into the Eastern vibes, and he was studying astrology and that kind of thing. And so he goes to the temple. He's like, all right, this place looks pretty cool. And the arati was going on at that time. And so Radha and Krishna were there. They were dressed very beautifully, and the flower garlands were on. And the pujari was standing there, ringing the bell and waving the incense, offering the lamp. And Sadhuj was standing there thinking, this is a very deep ceremony. This is a very deep thing happening right now. What that guy is doing is trying to distract me. This whole show, these dolls dressed up really nicely and all the lights and the flowers, and then this guy ringing the bell and waving the smoke. He's trying to distract me from focusing on nothing. The whole thing is created to pull my senses in, and I have to try to withdraw them. And that's what this ceremony is about, is being indifferent or undisturbed by all this beauty happening, all these sounds going on, all this smoke and mirrors. And I'm to ignore it and simply be nothing. That was his understanding of the arati. Now he is right in one, he got a little bit of it right, didn't he? What's the purpose of the arati ceremony?
To be seen.
To be seen by Krishna and also to see Krishna. It's
Attract.
Yeah, to be attracted to the form of Krishna, to be attracted to his worship, to appreciate his lotus feet and the way the pujaris had put little gopi dots on his feet and on his forehead, and the flower garland that somebody took hours to be able to string together, and the beautiful outfit he's wearing that somebody took the time to weave. To appreciate all that is the purpose of the arati. So he understood that the purpose, there was an attempt to draw his attention in, but he misunderstood that the purpose was to keep your attention there, not to try to withdraw it. So we have to avail ourselves of the complete understanding. Otherwise, especially in the West, we have this tendency to try to concoct, to try to create something which isn't actually true and make that up as religion. And Sadhuj was, you could say, innocent in his ignorance. He wasn't trying to create something counterproductive to Krishna consciousness. And when he was shown better, then he learned to do better. What to do, how to avoid, how to know when we're being led down the path of a cheater. Srila Prabhupada gives a few criteria throughout his books, and those are coming also from the previous acharyas, such as Rupa Goswami. We got a question or something, or just the feed stuff?
Oh, just the audio is a little weak.
So Prabhupada emphasizes over and over again that if we're going to follow a person, or a religious process, then it has to be authorized by Guru Sadhguru Shastra. Narottam Das gives this standard, and Prabhupada carries it forward. And Prabhupada jokes that these days the religionists, they'll tell you don't need to read books. But that's the first thing you need to do, is make sure that the person is speaking from the Vedic literature, speaking from authorized spiritual scripture. Otherwise, they're just making something up, and they're just trying to gain, more Instagram followers in the process. And you can make up anything into a religion if you just want Facebook followers. You can come up with. Ananda Murari sent me something yesterday as a joke of something that was sent to him by some goofball. The cure for coronavirus, a quantum mantra. Now that sounds cool, doesn't it? People are into quantum physics. Huh? Yeah, people are into quantum physics. People are into mantras. Let me make a quantum mantra to destroy the coronavirus. I think I'll get 1 million YouTube followers, right? So this quantum mantra, Ananda Murari, is pretty funny. He said it just looked like somebody like fell asleep on their keyboard. It's just like blah, 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 blah.
Oh, that's what he said.
That's what the mantra looked like. The mantra. So this quantum mantra, how many poor saps are sitting there trying to, repeat this quantum mantra in the earnest hope that they'll be protected from the coronavirus because of all this nasty fear mongering that's been going on in society around this thing. Very little transcendental perspective. Not to say that there's not a disease there, and not to say that there shouldn't be precautions taken around it. However, there's only so much that can be prevented in the course of disease. Birth, old age, disease, and death are always going to be there. Can't get rid of them. As soon as polio was cured, cancer started. You didn't hear about cancer 100 years ago. Now everybody gets cancer all the time. You heard 100 years ago about polio and smallpox, etc. Today, all you hear about is cancer. No more polio, no more smallpox, because we seem to have sidestepped those. But karma, Captain Karma, always has something else coming down the pipeline. There's always something new to enact upon the living entities the suffering that we deserve to be experiencing. So without that transcendental perspective and the kind of peace of mind that comes with knowing, okay, it's going to come someday or another. So let me focus on what I can really control, which is my internal experience, my relationship with God and his devotees. Instead, people are hyper obsessed with micromanaging every element of their lives to try and avoid this coronavirus. And some poor fool is sitting there now trying to decipher and repeat the quantum mantra to cure themselves of the coronavirus. So this is, and then when they're presented with the Maha Mantra, they think, oh, does this cure the coronavirus? Because that's what mantras must be able to do. They misunderstand the whole purpose of religion, which is not to protect yourself, not to get yourself rich, not to get yourself followers, not to marry your child off to some wealthy family or some beautiful progeny. The purpose of religion is to develop a relationship with Krishna. And that purpose is lost in this atmosphere of cheating practices, but also ultimately cheating purposes that are presented by all these fake pseudo-religionists. So that's what I wanted to share about Aristasura. And just to, again, highlight that tendency that we have in the West to our natural and to some degree healthy skepticism about religion, because we've had so many bad experiences with it. Just as another aside, there's this show, John Oliver does this HBO show. What is that called? The Daily? It's not The Daily Show. Last Week Tonight. Last Week Tonight. Yeah. So he's atheistic. I'm not a huge fan of him. His jokes are not always, they're very crass. So he plays on a lot of that. I'm not really promoting watching him. But the one clever thing he does is that he kind of, anybody that he's trying to do an expose on, any group he's trying to expose, he really he trolls them hard. Let's put it that way. Like, he doesn't just speak about them, but he kind of interacts with them. And through the interactions with that group, he bears out what's wrong. And so one day he decided to interact with a group of Pentecostals, the type of people that say, you send us $10 and your family will be immune from coronavirus. And there's these televangelists, Christian televangelists, and they have millions of followers who send them on the total billions of dollars. And these are the guys, the Jerry Falwells and the, Makoto sent me another one. I forget the guy's name at the moment, but he's another very famous one. And they're the guys that buy themselves jets and private mansions, et cetera, all in the name of their preaching. And so John Oliver trolled these guys hard, and he kept sending his $10 and $10 so that they would send him another letter glorifying all the blessings that are going to come from Christ because he's sending them $10. And then he just started reading all those out on the air. And it just like the absurdity and the ugliness and the sad reality that there's literally hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people out there who are participating in this guy's scheme, thinking that this is the purpose of religion. This is the purpose of, I'm protecting myself, doing the best thing for my family spiritually by following this, jerk who's just making himself rich, playing on the fears and sensitivities and ignorance of the people in general. So the hell that's destined for that person, we don't want to even think about. So seeing all that, witnessing all that, especially, the millennial generation and the Gen Zs, the 30-somethings and the 20-somethings, we know better than to get into that. But unfortunately, in the name of knowing better not to get into that, then we start following the Tony Robbins and such, right? We start to think that they are the gurus and they are the heroes. And YOLO, I only live once, so I have to make the most of this life right now, not give it to anyone else for anything else, but my own experience, whatever I can enjoy. And that's the truth. That's God, is the intensity of sense enjoyment I can create for myself. That's what we wind up following and being attracted by. In the name of rejecting these cheating religionists, we get into something that's equally as bad, equally as destructive for the soul. So we have to be on guard for this tendency in our Western-minded hearts, not to reject the wholesome practices of Krishna consciousness, just because on the surface they look like we're trying to become controlled and subordinated by some religious group, right? The Vaishnavas, only up until, and it's fair to say that in the last 50, 100 years, because of the institutionalization of Vaishnavism for practical purposes, there has been more of an element of exploitation in the devotee Sangha than in previous generations. So it's not to say that we don't watch out for it in the devotee Sangha. However, if you look at the culture and history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there was never an institution to be exploited by, right? The people who are propagating Krishna consciousness themselves were not interested in having a bunch of followers. In fact, they didn't want followers. They had to be told to go get them. They had to be told to go preach. They had to be told to go create a group and interest and power, so to speak. Otherwise, their only interest was themselves doing bhajan, themselves doing devotional service, chanting the holy name and hearing the pastimes of Krishna. And that was enough for them because in their own hearts, they were satisfied. So many of them were mendicants. Many of them gave up their prestigious positions in society and just enjoyed themselves the practice of Krishna consciousness. They had to be requested specifically by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to go out and give this to others. Otherwise, they were just happy in their own bhajan. And so today is, for us, a special day. It's the disappearance day of Srila Gorakishore Das Babaji, who is one of the devotees in our Shiksha Parampara. He's the initiating spiritual master of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. So he's also in our Diksha line. He's also one of in our Diksha Parampara. And Gorakishore is an ideal example of complete rejection of anything that might even be tinged with the tendency towards cheating religion. Srila Gorakishore was a sadhu, and he chanted, he had a wife who he counted as a very pious woman and a blessing from Krishna. In fact, of his wife, he said to be blessed with a Vaishnavi for a wife is the greatest benediction that Krishna can give you. This was Gorakishore's statement, and we now think of him famously as a renunciate, but in the early days of his Krishna consciousness, he was married. And he made this statement that to have a Vaishnavi as a wife is the greatest blessing that can be bestowed upon a man by Krishna. So he had a wife, but she passed away. And once she passed away, then Gorakishore just became a mendicant in the strictest sense of the word. He had practically no home. He wouldn't even chant his japa in a publicly obvious place to avoid any potential for people following him, appreciating him, coming to ask for mundane blessings. He would chant his japa in the funeral crematorium where they burned dead bodies, or he would go to some outhouse or some latrine where people go to pass school. And in India, it's not that you poop into a white porcelain bowl, and then it gets swept away and you never see it again. In India, the toilet is just a hole dug a few feet deep, and everybody's stool is just piling up there. So it's not a very attractive place. There's flies, there's a horrible smell, and that's where Gorgashore would go to chant his japa, so that no one would bother him, and no one would, even if they wanted to, care to spend the time to try to, take his blessings. He would take his prasad from a skull. He would eat from a half cut off human skull, and he would just take some rice, soak it in Ganga water, and add a little bit of salt. There's your praman, Ujjwal Prabhu. He would add a little bit of salt and just eat that Ganga, just eat rice soaked, not cooked, in Ganga water. So these are some of the austerities of Gorkishore, and that he did not so people could think of him as austere, not so they could marvel at his detachment, but just so he himself would not be distracted or worked up about anything other than the holy name. One day, a man from Calcutta, he came to Gorkishore. He said, I'm getting married. You please bless me. And Gorkishore said, I marry you to, I bless you to reject this marriage and sit here and chant Hare Krishna with me on the banks of the Ganga. And the guy, no, Swamiji, take it back. So Prabhupada also had this experience with many businessmen. A Calcutta businessman, again, came to Srila Prabhupada. This is in the Lilamrita. He said, Swamiji, please bless me. And Prabhupada, knowing the kind of blessings this guy wanted, please bless me, pretty wife, lots of money, blah, 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 the usual material menu. Prabhupada said, I bless you to become like my American brahmacharis. Right? American brahmacharis mean not the Indian brahmacharis, the American brahmacharis who gave up their wealthy, comfortable position in the West, right, the so-called top of the world. And instead, now they're just living as mendicants, serving the order of their spiritual master. I bless you to become like my American brahmacharis. And the guy said, no, Swamiji, please take it back. So what do we really want in our life? What do we really want in our Krishna consciousness, in our religious practice? Srila Gorkishore is that example for our movement. Yes, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was an extremely learned person. He dressed in very nice clothes. He established 64 Gaudiya Mats. He spent time with extremely wealthy people. He even at some points was willing to serve the British, who he was hosting, the British government. He served them meat to be able to enjoin their favor and get them to do a few things that he wanted them to do. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta practically broke every rule in the book when it comes to a Gaudiya Vaishnava mendicant. He's a sannyasi himself, so he's supposed to be pretty detached from the material energy, practically completely detached. And yet, externally, if you look at him, he seemed very detached or attached. In fact, Srila Gorkishore, his Diksha Guru, gave Srila Bhaktisiddhanta 3 orders, which he apparently broke all of. He said, don't take any disciples, don't go to Calcutta, don't associate with worldly people, but rich men. Don't associate with rich men. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta did, on the outside, he did all those things. He hung out with rich guys. He established temples in Calcutta. He made that his base. And obviously, he took on disciples, such as Srila Prabhupada. So then, was he disobeying the order of Gorkishore? No. He understood the purport, the real meaning of that order of Gorkishore, which was that don't associate with worldly men for the purpose of yourself becoming one. Oh, I might get a few nice, comfortable places to live if I hang out with these guys. I might get a nice paycheck. I might get a pretty wife. Don't go to Calcutta looking for sense enjoyment. Go to Calcutta to give true sense enjoyment, Krishna consciousness. So he made his Vaikuntha center. He said the Vaikuntha bubble, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta coined the term. He made his spiritual embassy, the temples of the Gaudiya Mat in Calcutta, and that's where he spent his time. Not at the movie theaters or at the bar or at the restaurants or at the brothels. He spent his time at his temples, and therefore he said, I never went to Calcutta. I brought Vaikuntha to Calcutta. And then take disciples? Well, he said, these disciples, they are actually my gurus. They are my teachers. My spiritual master has sent them to help me execute his order, without which I would be incapable of doing so. one day, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and I'll close here, and then we'll see if there's any comments or questions from anybody. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was on a steamship going up the Ganga. And the steamship, like we have in the Mississippi here in America, there's big wheels, paddle wheel boats, double decker, and they're going up the Ganga. And the gentleman was asking Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, your Guru Maharaj is a mendicant, and not a very learned person either. He was said to be illiterate. He wasn't illiterate. He just wasn't formally educated. So I don't understand how it is that such an erudite, influential person as yourself could take initiation from a very simple, common mendicant, basically. Not to say anything belittling of Srila Gorkshora Babaji, the person was, but he was saying Bhaktisiddhanta is kind of a different echelon in his estimation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said, just like this paddle boat, the common man is looking at this boat and seeing this big wooden wheel moving in the water. And that person is thinking that this big wooden wheel is what's moving this boat forward up against the current of the river. However, an engineer, an educated person knows that it's not this big wooden wheel that's actually moving. There's a motor inside, relatively small. There's a steam motor inside the ship, which is moving that paddle, which is actually moving the boat against the current of the Ganga and upstream. In the same way, I may be that big wooden wheel, which all the common people are seeing being moved and thinking that I'm the one moving this Gaudiya Math up the energy of the material current and towards our real destination, our real home. But the intelligent person recognizes that it's actually Srila Gaurikishore. It is his heart, that little steam motor, which is invisible to the common man. It is his heart, his desire to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Sri Sri Radha Krishna that is moving this Gaudiya Math and is forcing me to act as this big wooden wheel, which is apparently carrying everything forward. So Gaurikishore reminds us, what is the real purpose of our movement? What is the purpose of the buildings and the money and the printing of the books and the feeding of the paneer sabji on the Sunday and the fresh flower garlands on the deities and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? What is the purpose of all of this? It's to develop attraction for Radha and Krishna, to develop attraction for the pastimes of the divine couple, to develop an attraction for the service of the mission of the spiritual master and Sri Chaitanya. That's the point. And if that's not what you're doing or why you're doing it, then you shouldn't be doing it. Then it's Aristasura stuff. It's cheating religion. It's made up. It's it's going to get you in trouble. It's going to get you smashed on the head with your own horn. So get out of it, and to be introspective and to check in regularly. Why am I doing this? Am I doing? And I've had to look at myself before and make an evaluation, just sharing some open reflections here on my own Krishna consciousness. Being that I'm able to speak in a way that others appreciate, and so then you wind up getting asked to give a lot of classes, and especially during this pandemic time, give a lot of classes in a lot of places I've never been and I'll never go. Just online classes with people that I don't know, I've never met. And I noticed that I was signing up for a lot of those engagements which are being requested of me, but I was, in giving time to those things, losing out on spending time in places where I've already committed. I have responsible, connected relationships, and that matter more to me, frankly. And so then I had to ask myself, why am I signing up for all of these things? Because I don't feel so nourished by giving those classes to people I can't see and I don't know. Right? It's actually a very awkward class to give, because what am I supposed to say to you? I don't know your situation. I don't really know how to bring the philosophy home to anonymous people on the other side of the screen. So then, am I signing up for these things just because I like thinking that people want to hear from me? And it sounds cool that I'm giving all these different talks in all these different places? Or am I signing up because I'm really, excited to share Krishna consciousness with them? And I had to admit, actually, it's more the latter, the former. I like the idea of giving classes to a bunch of people that I've never met before who asked me just because they heard I was good at that in some kind of shallow way. So then I scaled back and I started saying, no, I'm not going to, I don't have the time, I'm not able. You'd be better off finding somebody closer to your own community who, not that you shouldn't want somebody to come and share Krishna Katha with you, but find somebody that's a little more connected. I don't feel qualified yet to just, speak to random strangers and really feel like I can benefit them. I feel comfortable speaking to communities who I know something about and I have some connection with. So I said, when the Cleveland devotees ask me to come speak, I'll speak to those devotees because we have some relationship there. When the Chicago devotees ask me to come speak, or the Toronto devotees, because I have some relationship with them, or the TSI devotees on Sunday ask me, some relationships there, so then I feel comfortable and I feel more wholesome in my own intention. But when it's just some random group somewhere that I've never had a connection with before, I stop and think twice now before saying yes. Not that I shouldn't always, but I stop and examine my own motives before jumping into that. So just some personal reflection there. And in our own ways, whatever our particular services, we have to be diligent in looking out for this aristasura tendency that we're making up something, we're concocting religious practice, and we're overemphasizing externals as accomplishments of religion. Oh, I've got followers. Oh, I've got money. Oh, I've got property, and that means that I'm a very advanced devotee. That's a mistake, and it will bring our downfall in the devotee sangha. So we follow the example of Gaura and we celebrate him especially today. The real success, the real attainment, the real victory is taste for non-bhajan, taste for Krishna Katha, this Hari Katamritam, feeling the nectar of the chanting and the glorification of Shri Shri Radhika and Krishna. And without that, we don't have success yet. That's our only standard in the ultimate sense. So any comments or questions from you, Prabhu, or anybody online by chance? Yeah, for sure.
I was thinking about what you're saying about how Westerners have a tendency to speculate.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would always envy the simple-hearted devotees, wherever I would meet them, just quite often. And I would always envy them because they make Krishna so easy to practice. And I was always like, wow, I wish I was like that, but I'm not. It makes it hard to practice just in a very simple way, regulated way. So I was thinking how to kind of move beyond this kind of like speculative, and it's also an element of that kind of speculation is also a kind of absorption in one's own, self. And that's like the American thing. It's like I gotta look out for number one, and I don't know if this is really the best for me or should I really, give all my time, it's like this there. So I think a lot about how to look beyond that, kind of speculative mind and be able to just be more simple in my approach to practicing Krishna Bhakti. Because, in my kind of like heart, I can understand it, but it's always like, it seems to continue coming back to that kind of like speculative mind of like, well, this and that, and stupid reasons that really don't make any sense. So, I'm just kind of curious how to move past that and just really come into a very so many of my godbrothers I'm just like, wow, they're just so simple. It's just like, this is, and my Guru Maharaj always talks about how simple the practice is when we have faith, and that process works, just do it right, So it's like, I continue to have experiences with Krishna consciousness that are like mind-blowing, but they're not. So it gets quite
not a daily experience.
Yeah, so then it's kind of like you're in this weird place of like, I know that it works, but I don't experience it regularly. So I find that to be quite frustrating. So that's kind of something I've been about.
Would you like me to share? Yeah. Thank you. Great point. And the portion that was a question, like kind of what's getting in the way of that. Just yesterday, I was reading an excerpt from one of the Sundarbhas, and Jiva Goswami was explaining, kind of answering the question of why Nam Sankirtan wasn't propagated in previous ages. And he quotes something from the Skanda Purana explaining that it's not that Nam Sankirtan chanting wasn't the paradharma, wasn't the highest thing to be doing in other ages. It's not that the name wasn't non-different from Krishna in other ages, but in other ages, the kind of pride that the people had based on their own prowess prevented them, or would prevent them, from feeling that something as simple as just saying these words would be good enough to get you spiritual perfection. Like, it's got to be more complicated than this. And I remember feeling that same way myself, but also recognizing the certain brilliance of this Sankirtan process, this chanting of the holy name in the community of other devotees. Like, yeah, I want to look special. And there's nothing special about me sitting in a room of 100 other people saying the same 3 words over and over again. There's like no way for me to look unique and cool and different doing that. So that if I'm not going to get that experience from doing that, surrendering to just sitting there and saying these same 3 words over and over again, then I better try to actually get the experience that is meant to create, because that's the only place I'm going to get taste from. So that's what I've found, is that like coming to Bhagavatam class or chanting your rounds at a good time of the day, like or going to the kirtan, even when it's a program and you don't want to because so and so is going to be there, or you've done it 100 other times. It's like, yeah. And if I let that stop me from going to chant the holy name, I'm the dummy. I'm the loser, right? The awkwardness of the institution is unavoidable, always going to be there. But if we allow that awkwardness to prevent us from going to get the real thing is not sitting in a room of 100 people at 7 o'clock on a Saturday or Sunday or a Thursday night or whatever. The real thing is going to chant the holy name. And if I bring that consciousness to the experience, Krishna gives me that experience. But if I bring that idea that, oh, this is just what I have to do because I'm a good devotee, or I want to look like a good devotee, or so-and-so said I have to, or, to solve my chapati problems, I want to live in the temple still, so I have to perform certain functions and duties, then that's my fault for not bringing that sense of opportunity to the experience and just letting it be something mundane. So that's the very unique nature, the versatility of the holy name, is that for somebody it can be a very mundane experience, and for somebody else it can be completely transcendental. In the same kirtan, the same 3 words, and 2 people can have completely different experiences based on their intention and desire. So to be intentional in that moment, let it be about the transcendental thing. Yes, the mundane circumstance is also there, the institutional awkwardness, whatever you want to characterize it, but let it be about the transcendental thing. Let your faith in that supersede all the other considerations. So there's that side of it, and then the other side I was thinking is that oftentimes the reason we're apprehensive about really being simple in our faith and really serving with an open heart is we're trying to protect ourselves. We're fearful living entities who've been abused so many times by so many unscrupulous people, and so we're scared. And in that, I always think about this exchange that Ravan has with Marichi just before Marichi manifests as the golden deer. Ravan says, go do this, go manifest as the golden deer and distract Ram. And Marichi says, I'm not going to do that. Ram will kill me. And then Ravana says, well, if you don't, then I'll kill you. And so then Marichi says, all right. And he manifests as the golden deer. And then Ravan, before he goes up, he says, what changed your mind? I thought you were worried about getting killed by Ram. He said, yes, I am. But if I'm going to get killed anyway, better to be killed by Ram than a jerk like you. So,
Mic drop.
So in the name of not being abused or harassed or exploited by temple presidents or GBCs or whatever, we allow ourselves to be abused and harassed by our own mind and to stay in a very shallow, petty existence and keep ourselves from any real responsible investment in the devotee sangha. And that's sad, that we die on the cross of our mind instead of on the hypothetical suffering that's going to be created by this, institutional situation, whatever it might be. So being I mean, practically, who was it the other day? Other Lokram was saying, and I like it. It's still helpful, although it's a little, it can be overused. But if your mind says don't do something, it's the first thing you should do. We really have to examine when our mind says don't do that thing. You know, and especially after you've been around a few years and you think you know what's going on and you think you know what's good for you and what's not good for you and what you need to do and not do and what services are yours and what services are somebody else's. Really got to examine that. And because oftentimes just doing the simple things are so joyful. It's so happy to like sweep the floor, right? But we don't let ourselves sweep the floor because we're too good to do it now. You know, that's when I'm Bhakta and the temple president was lording it over me, and I'm not. I'm above that now. So really being wary and introspective. Yoga yukto munir brahman nachare navigachati. Krishna says, you attain me without delay when you're a thoughtful person. So always examining this tendency to avoid service and try to look like we're established devotees when ironically we're doing less than we could and should. Yeah, those are my thoughts when you're sharing that. Anybody else? Ujjwal, you got something?
I like that last point, especially because in my limited experience, Krishna definitely plays tricks on you when you feel like you're established, you know, and it really is a matter of being introspective and also just being open. That, you know, okay, I have a pretty good idea of the direction I want to go, but definitely I always have to keep that like 20% just open vision, like, well, what am I being asked right now? In the moment, what's presenting itself, and always ready. And I feel like sometimes it's just because Krishna is a little tricky, just always like letting him know that I'm listening, like I'm here, I'm not trying to get settled into a rut, I'm trying to not necessarily lord over my situation. And yeah, until you get that, it can be so frustrating because you feel like, what the hell am I supposed to do? Like, I thought I'm doing the right thing, you know, but really it's a matter of just, I mean, that's what it means to be a servant in the highest sense, isn't it? Just being ready to do what you're asked. And again, not in that, you know, sycophantic kind of puerile way, but really like on it, like ready to.
Johnny on the spot.
Yeah, ready to, you know, again, all these things are overused to do the needful, you know, and they're used in negative ways in many places because they're very simple ways to affect your will.
Right.
But internally, like for me to meditate on that is very important and understand, like, yeah, what is the greater thing that I'm sitting. So yeah, I really like that.
Vishnuji, anything you want to share? Okay. Rajashima Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Krishna ki jai.